Doug was folding one of her blouses, blue satin, smelled like coconut shampoo, when she walked into the room like it was a runway. He hated that blouse, always had. She only wore it when she wanted to feel powerful. And sure enough, the suitcase rolled behind her like a prop in some low-budget drama she thought she was directing. "It's just a church retreat," Melissa said, tossing her flat iron in like a dagger. "Women's ministry. They booked a hotel downtown. We're sharing rooms to cut costs." Doug looked up from the laundry basket. One bra, red, one pair of heels he hadn't seen since their last anniversary, and peeking out from the zippered pocket, something black, lace, and absolutely not on any packing list from a Sunday bulletin. He lifted it gently with 2 fingers. "That for the Holy Spirit?" She didn't even flinch, just rolled her eyes like he was a child interrupting her grown-up plans. "If you trusted me, you wouldn't care who I share a room with." That was the line, right there. The moment she drew it in the sand with a smirk, daring him to cross it. He didn't argue, didn't raise his voice, just folded the blouse, set it down, and walked to his desk, changed the password to the Wi-Fi, locked her out of the Apple ID, cut off access to the security cameras she'd always conveniently forgotten to check when things got weird around the house. He didn't make a scene because this wasn't a scene anymore. This was a stage. And she'd been acting for months. By the way, if you're this far into the story and haven't followed yet, do it. Over 90% of you read without subscribing. And honestly, it's what fuels the team to keep digging deeper and bringing stories like this to life. One click makes a difference. Anyway, back to Melissa, the church retreat actress with a suitcase full of sins. Doug knew exactly which hotel she mentioned. Downtown, overpriced, connected to a steakhouse with $60 ribeyes and too many mirrors. He checked the church's website, no mention of a retreat, no women's event, not even a potluck on the calendar. He tried asking her once in bed the night before her trip, just floated it casually. "So who's your roommate?" She stretched, yawned, facing away. "Tina, I think. Maybe Rachel. Depends who shows up." Translation: "Someone I don't want you to Google." She fell asleep fast. Doug didn't. He just stared at the ceiling fan turning overhead, slowly, like time dragging its feet towards something inevitable. He remembered something then. 2 years ago, he'd done consulting work for a hotel security system company, helped them overhaul their digital archive protocol. One of the locations? That exact hotel. Downtown, the one with the mirrors and the ribeyes. He still had a contact. A guy named Harris? Nerdy, discreet, the type who knew how to pull footage without alerting anyone on the premises. Doug didn't even have to explain much, just said he needed hallway video access for a certain room during a certain weekend. Harris said he'd check the system and get back to him. Doug hung up and sat down at the kitchen island. Melissa was already asleep upstairs, probably dreaming of salvation, or steak, or silk. He opened a new email, typed in a name he hadn't thought he'd ever contact like this. Pastor Whitmore, Melissa's father. The man who baptized their daughter, the man who still said grace before meals even at Arby's. Subject line, something you need to see. He didn't attach anything, just added one sentence. Please expect a link this weekend. Only open it alone. Then he sat back, breathed through his nose, and looked out the window. Their porch light buzzed in the wind. It flickered, faint, like someone up there knew what was about to come down. He didn't feel powerful. Not really. Just done. Not the kind of done you shout about. Not the kind that ends in a slammed door or a broken plate. The kind where you've done the math, accepted the answer, and started drafting your exit strategy with surgical hands. Melissa left Friday morning with a kiss that didn't land. "Pray for me," she laughed. Doug smiled. "Already have." She thought he meant safety, but Doug had already prayed for truth. And truth was coming, wearing a timestamp and hotel-issued bathrobe. The minute the front door clicked shut behind her, Doug opened his laptop like it was a crime scene. He didn't pace, he didn't rub his temples or collapse onto the couch like some dramatic husband in a Lifetime movie. No, he went full analyst, the same way he used to troubleshoot broken systems back in his IT consulting days, except this time the virus wore perfume and pretended to pray. First stop, the church's website. Nothing about a women's retreat, not in announcements, not in upcoming events, not in the archive of weekly bulletins. He even checked the calendar Melissa helped run. Last post? Youth bowling night. Canceled. No mention of any overnight stays, room shares, or emotional healing weekends that would explain why she packed enough lace to open a Victoria's Secret pop-up. He moved on to the hotel. Public bookings, no mention of any faith renewal or Soul Sisters retreat. He clicked deeper, opening the corporate portal for vendors and services. Then he picked up the phone and dialed. "Hi, this is Ryan from Clear Earth Supplies. I'm calling about the hospitality gift baskets for this weekend's group. Just confirming the room block name." Receptionist didn't even hesitate. "Let me see. Yes, we have a private block reserved under the name Callahan. Check in Friday, 22 rooms." Callahan, Melissa's friend from church, single, flirted with anything with biceps and Bible verses, the one Doug once caught texting her at midnight on a girls only fast and prayer Zoom. Melissa had called him paranoid, said Callahan was spiritually adventurous. Doug wrote the name down anyway. Then something flicked on in his memory like a switch in the attic. The chain. The hotel was part of the Solace Group, and 2 years back, Doug had helped audit their regional security vendors, mostly boring stuff, redundancy storage, timestamp protocols, digital backups. But the downtown location had been one of the test sites for a continuous backup stream, footage saved to both local and remote drives for up to 7 days before cycling out. He opened his contacts, scrolled, found the name. Harris Kim. The guy answered on the second ring. "Harris? Doug? Holy crap, haven't heard from you since. I need a favor. Quiet one." Harris's tone shifted instantly. "Okay, what's up? You still doing digital footage backups for the Solace downtown?" "Yeah, why?" "Room 802 this weekend. Just the hallway. Timestamp everything." "Security clearance?" "I still have the vendor access string from the audit, DKM 9998. Harris whistled. "That'll work. You want it sent to you?" "No, you'll get a follow-up address. Forward it there Sunday night. Not before." "You got it." "No names?" "No names." Dug into the call and sat there, hands steepled. It was almost too easy, too clean. But betrayal, when it's habitual, breeds laziness. She thought he wouldn't dig because he hadn't before. That was her fatal error, not the cheating, not the lying, not even the lingerie for Jesus. It was underestimating the man who used to debug multinationals for fun. He leaned back, letting silence settle around him like dust. His phone buzzed once, a text from Melissa. "Love you, already missing our bed." He stared at the message. There was no typo, no odd grammar, just casual, weaponized sweetness. He didn't respond. Instead, he pulled open the drawer where they kept their travel paperwork, found an old map Melissa used to keep in her Bible, the one with circles drawn around Christian bookstores and vegan brunch spots. On the corner, written in her handwriting, was a verse, "Everything hidden will be made visible." Luke 8:17. He smirked. "Guess we'll test that one." Then he pulled out his notebook, the one he hadn't touched since before their anniversary trip to Lake Placid. Page 1. Timeline. He drew a line. Friday, check-in. Saturday, peak hours. Sunday, return. Under Saturday, he wrote, "Target, 7 to 12 p.m. activity window." He added a final word beneath it. Consequence. He wasn't waiting for proof anymore. He wasn't asking for trust. He was building a file. One hallway. One camera. One fall from grace caught in 1080p. Melissa left like she was going on a cruise instead of a church retreat. Hair curled, nails freshly done. French tip, which she always said was too flashy for spiritual gatherings. Her suitcase was overpacked, not with Bibles or devotionals, but with things that made silk whisper and heels click. Doug didn't say a word as he loaded her luggage into the back of the car. He didn't comment when she sprayed perfume on her neck twice, or when she asked if he could swing by that little French bakery while she was gone to pick up the lemon tarts she liked. They drove in silence. She hummed some song, sounded like Sade, said she might turn her phone off, just to be present, said the retreat was about disconnecting and hearing God's voice. Doug nodded like he agreed, like he believed. When he parked at the departures terminal, she leaned over and kissed him lightly. A peck. The kind people give strangers when they pretend to be something they're not. "Pray for me," she said again. "I always do," he replied, with a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. She wheeled her suitcase away without looking back. Her boarding pass was already in hand. Doug sat there for a moment, hands still on the wheel, watching the terminal door slide shut behind her. Then he exhaled. Back home, he made tea, sat at the dining table she used to decorate with candles and fake eucalyptus. He pulled out his laptop. His inbox blinked. Harris had followed through. Access credentials for the digital footage archive were active and ready. Doug didn't hesitate. He opened a blank email and typed out a message with surgical precision. Subject: confidential footage. Please forward all footage from hallway outside room 802 between 7 o'clock p.m. and 12 o'clock a.m. on Saturday night. Authorization code DKM 988. This is time sensitive. Thank you. But he didn't send it to Harris. He didn't BCC himself. He didn't even save a copy. He sent it to one recipient only: Pastor Charles Whitmore, Melissa's father, shepherd of 3 congregations, guest speaker at national prayer breakfasts, the man who once told Doug, "What's done in the dark eventually chokes in the light." Doug stared at the send button for a full 10 seconds. Then he clicked it. No fanfare, no hesitation. Just the quiet finality of a man who knew that justice wasn't always loud. Sometimes it wore the robes of patience and held a timestamp. He closed the laptop, leaned back, and let the silence wrap around him again. The clock ticked. Somewhere outside, a dog barked, far off. He didn't reach for his phone, didn't check her messages. He didn't need to. The wheels were already turning, and this time he wasn't the one being dragged. Melissa's father would receive the footage Sunday night. Doug had timed it with eerie precision. Enough hours after her checkout, but not so late that she could intercept or do damage control. Pastor Whitmore would be home from church, probably in his recliner, probably wearing those glasses he used for reading letters from missionaries. This time, the missionary message came from a hallway camera. Lens of truth. Doug didn't want to see the footage. He didn't need the details anymore. The robe, the laugh, the man, whoever he was, were just actors now. The real theater was watching a woman try to lie her way through God's own house, and watching her father see it for himself. Because Doug knew something Melissa didn't. He knew that you could lie to a husband. You could cry your way through a confrontation, twist facts, weaponize guilt, but you can't spin your way out of a timestamp. You can't seduce a security feed, and you sure as hell can't gaslight a pastor with footage of your half-naked repentance. Walk back to room 802. Doug poured himself a second cup of tea and sat by the window. He didn't feel victorious. He felt quiet, calm, like a man standing at the edge of a cliff, no longer worried about the fall because the truth was doing all the pushing. He glanced at the framed wedding photo on the mantle, Melissa in white, him in charcoal gray, her father in the background, blurry but smiling, hand raised in blessing. He wondered if that same hand would tremble when it hit pause on the video, when it saw what Melissa had traded that blessing for. Doug didn't plan what would happen next. He didn't have to. He had already made the only move that mattered, and now all he had to do was wait. The footage landed in Pastor Whitmore's inbox at 10:41 p.m. He'd just returned from evening service. Attendance was light, the sermon was heavier than usual. Some instinct had pressed on him all day, like a bruise beneath the skin. He'd preached from James chapter 1:22, "Be doers of the word, and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves." He remembered because the word deceiving tasted strange in his mouth, bitter, prophetic. He wasn't a man of drama. He read things twice, prayed before reacting, but as soon as he saw the subject line, confidential footage, his stomach turned over like a stone in wet earth. He recognized the sender, Doug, his son-in-law, reliable, quiet, not a flair for theatrics kind of man. If Doug was sending something with a timestamp and a code, it wasn't clickbait. It was confession in the form of evidence. He clicked the link. The screen flickered. Surveillance feed, no audio. Hallway, 8th floor, hotel downtown. High-quality camera. Clearly, one of those new models with sharp frame transitions. He squinted slightly and hit play. There she was, Melissa, his daughter, his only daughter. Hair wet, skin glowing in the sharp white light of the hallway. A robe, short, belted in a way that made him flinch, loosely tied. She laughed, head thrown back like she used to do as a kid when he'd spin her by the arms in the living room. Except this time, it wasn't joy. It was seduction. A man entered the frame, taller, dark shirt, carrying 2 glasses and a bottle of something. Not wine. No hotel delivers communion like that. Melissa reached for his collar, pulled him in. The robe slipped on one shoulder. She whispered something, laughing. He stepped forward, clearly familiar, comfortable. They kissed. Not quick, not unsure. Like two people who'd done it before. Like two people with no reason to hide. The door to room 802 opened. She tugged him inside. Timestamp, 8:03 p.m. Whitmore hit pause. He stood up, left the study.
Walked to the kitchen, poured himself a glass of water with shaking hands, set it down, didn't drink. He returned to the screen, pressed play again. No activity for over 2 hours. Then, at 10:12 p.m., the door cracked open. The man stepped out, shirt untucked. Melissa followed, robe on again, but hair messier. She kissed him, once, twice. She smiled as she closed the door behind him like it was routine, like she was home. Whitmore froze the frame, stared at his daughter's face, pixel clear. He hit rewind, watched it again, and again, the robe, the laugh, the pull, the kiss. He didn't pray. Not yet. He picked up his phone, dialed her number, no answer, called again, straight to voicemail. He sat down at his desk and stared at the blank notepad next to his Bible. Melissa used to draw hearts in its margins when she was young and bored during service. He'd saved one of those pages in his top drawer. Still had it. Now he pulled it out and looked at it like it was from another life.
He told himself Doug was just suspicious, that maybe the marriage was strained, that maybe, just maybe, his daughter was stressed or misunderstood. But there was no misunderstanding a timestamp. There was no emotional confusion in a bathrobe and a bottle. There was no prayer to cover what had just seared into his mind. His daughter, so comfortable in betrayal, she didn't even check the hallway first. He stood slowly, walked to the living room, sat in his recliner, turned off the lamp, and he waited, not for her to call back, not for an apology, but for the truth to finish echoing in the quiet. She walked in like nothing had happened. Breeze in her step, voice a full octave higher than usual. That fake bright tone she used when she was overcompensating. She kicked off her shoes near the entryway and stretched like someone returning from a massage, not a ministry event. "Smells like lavender in here," she said, spinning slightly on her heel. "Did you clean?" Doug looked up from the kitchen table. "Figured you'd want to come home to a peaceful space." She beamed, dropped her overnight bag by the stairs. "Oh, that's sweet. You didn't have to." He noticed her skin still held the shine of hotel soap, that brand with the eucalyptus notes and too much glycerin. She hadn't even bothered to scrub off the night. Her hair was still damp at the ends. The lace she packed was tucked back in her suitcase, wrinkled, worn, unspoken evidence folded into nylon and denial. "Tea?" Doug asked, already pouring. She raised a brow, pleasantly surprised. "Sure, wow. Look at you." He handed her a mug without sitting down, watched as she sipped once and gave that little hum she always did, faux domestic bliss on autopilot. He waited, let her have one more second of comfort, then he said it. "Your dad called." The sound in the room snapped like a power line in a storm. Her hand froze mid-sip. She blinked too fast. Her entire face tried to recalibrate. "What?" she asked, the smile trying to hold, but already cracking at the corners. "Said he saw something disturbing." Melissa lowered the mug slowly, her lips parting just slightly. What do you mean by that?" Doug tilted his head. "Didn't he text you?" "No, I mean my phone was off," she faltered, then tried to steady her voice. "Wait, what did he say exactly?" "He said he watched something, didn't go into detail, just said, disturbing." Her eyes twitched. She ran a hand through her still damp hair. "You showed him something?" Doug sipped his own tea, didn't blink. "I trusted the hotel's cameras," he said flatly. That was enough. She went pale. Not dramatically, just drained, like someone realizing too late that the train they were boarding wasn't a church retreat, it was a courtroom. "Doug," she said, stepping forward, voice urgent but hushed. "What the hell did you do?" He raised an eyebrow. "Me? I didn't do anything. I just sent a timestamp." The truth handled the rest. "Are you serious right now?" Her voice was getting louder, unhinged. "You sent footage to my father? Are you out of your mind?" He stood now, slowly, tea mug still in hand. I figured he'd want to see what kind of retreat his daughter's attending, he said calmly. You know, since he blessed our marriage, since he called me a son, since he gave that whole sermon on covenant and betrayal just 3 months ago. She shook her head. You had no right. Doug cut her off, voice colder now. No right. No right to expose you or no right to go around your script. Melissa's mouth opened. Nothing came out. I wasn't going to scream, he continued. Wasn't going to throw your suitcase down the stairs or post screenshots to Facebook. That's not me. But I wasn't going to lie to a man who baptized our child either. She backed up a step, still clutching the tea like it could shield her. Her brain was racing through excuses, alternate realities, damage control tactics. I didn't think you'd actually, she started. No, Doug said, you didn't. That's your pattern. You bet on my silence. She flinched. And your dad, he added. He's not silent anymore either. Melissa turned, grabbed her phone off the entryway table, started frantically unlocking it. Her fingers were shaking. Doug watched her face as she opened her messages, watched her see the missed calls, the unread voicemail, and then that one text from her father, we need to talk. In person, she stared at the screen like it had betrayed her, like the world had tilted and no one sent her the memo. Doug walked past her, headed upstairs, pausing at the steps just long enough to leave one last line hanging in the air. Next time you plan a spiritual retreat, maybe don't pack the lingerie. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. Because for the first time in a long time, the house was filled with silence. Not the kind she used to weaponize, but the kind that follows when the performance ends and the spotlight burns out, and all that's left is the truth replaying in someone else's mind, frame by frame. The knock on the door came at 8:12 a.m., sharp, no frantic banging, no dramatic pounding, just 3 precise raps, controlled, unmistakable. The kind of knock that doesn't ask for permission. It announces presence. Doug was already up, dressed, drinking black coffee at the kitchen table. The only sound in the house was the soft hum of the refrigerator and the slight clink of the spoon in his mug. He didn't flinch, just stood, walked to the door, and opened it. There stood Pastor Whitmore. No Bible in hand, no warm smile, no sermon tucked behind the eyes. Just a man in a black overcoat, gray tie slightly askew, and a look that could split granite. Doug opened the door wider and stepped aside. Come in. The pastor entered without a word. He didn't remove his coat, didn't shake hands. He walked like he had a mission, and it wasn't reconciliation. Melissa came down the stairs, barefoot, hair disheveled. She was wearing a sweatshirt from a youth ministry retreat 3 years ago, back when things were easier to fake. Dad? Her voice cracked. What are you doing here? He looked up at her. His face was unreadable, but his eyes weren't. They were tired, crushed in a quiet way, like a man who had seen the veil lifted and didn't like what he saw behind it. I saw the footage, he said. Her breath hitched. Dad, I can explain. Don't. His voice didn't rise, it didn't tremble, but it hit her like a slap. Just don't. The air turned thick. The weight of his presence settled like judgment, and Melissa, who had once captivated entire Bible study groups with charm and crocodile tears, stood frozen. No script, no escape hatch. Doug said nothing, just leaned against the archway to the living room, arms crossed, observing. This wasn't his moment. He'd already handed over the match. The fire was someone else's now. Pastor Whitmore turned to Doug. I apologize, he said, voice low, for what my daughter put you through. Melissa's mouth opened. The silence that followed was unbearable. You're siding with him? She said, each word louder than the last. Her father didn't answer right away. He looked at her like he didn't recognize her, like he was searching for a familiar face beneath layers of someone else's skin. I'm not siding with anyone, he finally said. I'm siding with the truth. The words didn't roar. They didn't need to. Truth, when delivered by a father who once raised you to kneel at bedside prayers, doesn't need volume. It stings all the same. She took a step down, hand gripping the banister. You don't understand. This isn't what it looked like. It wasn't planned. I wasn't thinking straight. Stop, he said, cutting through her denial like a blade. I watched you pull him in by the shirt, Melissa. Twice. You kissed him like I hadn't married you two under a cross. He turned back to Doug, pain barely concealed. And you kept this quiet, dignified. I owe you more than an apology. Doug didn't nod, didn't gloat. He simply said, "You don't owe me anything." Melissa's hands began to tremble. "Dad, please, please don't do this here." "Where should I do it then?" he asked calmly. "At the pulpit? In front of the same congregation you've lied to for months? Should I preach about grace while you spend Saturday nights in robes you don't even wear at home?" Tears welled in her eyes, but none fell. She wasn't crying from guilt. Doug could tell. It was fear, the kind that comes when the mask cracks and the face beneath it isn't welcome anymore. "I just made a mistake." "No," her father said. "You made choices. Over and over." She sat down on the stairs, head in her hands, silent now. He turned to Doug one last time. "If you want me to speak with the elders, I will. If you want me to talk to your daughter about custody arrangements, I will." Doug shook his head. "Not now." Pastor Whitmore hesitated, then stepped toward the door. "This house," he said without turning, "is no place for pretending anymore." He left, quietly. No hugs, no prayers. Just the closing of a door that sounded, to Doug, like a chapter shutting. Melissa didn't move, didn't speak, just sat there finally without an audience and realized what silence felt like. When it wasn't part of her manipulation, she wasn't suspended, she was alone, and the first person to leave her wasn't Doug, it was the man who used to call her his pride. By Wednesday, the whispering had spread further than any sermon. It started with a woman named Carol, a sweet, older member of the ministry team, always smelling like peppermint and starch, who accidentally saw the footage. She'd been at Pastor Whitmore's house, dropping off prayer cards and a lemon bundt cake. He hadn't meant for her to see it, hadn't even realized the tab was open when he stepped away to take a call. But it autoplayed, full screen. Room 802, 8:03 p.m., Melissa in the robe. The kiss. The man. The second kiss. Carol froze, bundt cake in hand, eyes wide. Pastor came back into the room and stopped mid-sentence. Her hand was covering her mouth. She didn't speak, she just closed the laptop gently, nodded once and left. By Friday, 6 people had heard. By Saturday, it was most of the leadership. By Sunday, the head of women's ministry sent Melissa a tactful but unmistakable email. "Given the current spiritual circumstances, we'd recommend you take a temporary leave of absence from church functions and community events. This is for your healing and privacy." Translated, "Vanish quietly before this gets worse." Melissa tried to frame it like she was stepping away to recalibrate. She posted a vaguely inspirational quote on her church group's Facebook page, something about growing in private to bloom in public. The likes were minimal. Comments were polite but sterile. She didn't know half of them had seen the clip already, or worse, heard about it secondhand with extra flavor added in. Doug stayed silent through all of it. He didn't confirm, didn't deny, he didn't need to. When someone asked how Melissa was doing, he just gave a tight nod and said, "She's taking some time." Because now, her world was unraveling, and he was just the quiet center it spun around. Melissa spiraled in slow motion. She tried to regain ground, said it was a mistake, but told one of the elders' wives she was being spiritually attacked, claimed Doug had planted the footage. But when asked why her father didn't deny it, her answers got shaky. By the next Sunday, they'd removed her from the worship planning committee group chat. She confronted Doug that night. "You're just going to let me burn?" she said, standing in the hallway in one of his old t-shirts like it still gave her protection. "You're seriously going to let everyone think I'm a monster?" He looked up from his book, calm. "I'm not letting anyone do anything." Her eyes welled, the self-pity phase. "You didn't even try to protect me. You just sat back and watched. Do you know what it's like to feel everyone judging you?" He closed the book softly. "Melissa, I didn't betray you," he said. "I revealed you." The words hit harder than shouting ever could. She flinched like he'd struck her. Her lips parted, but there was no spin left. No one to lie for. Her father wasn't coming to her defense. Her church circle had gone cold. Even Callahan, the friend whose name she'd used for the hotel block, was taking space. "Doug," she whispered, "you could have handled this differently." "I did," he replied. "I didn't go public. I didn't post anything. I didn't yell. I gave one person the truth. That's all it took." She turned away, retreating into the guest bedroom she now called her own. The door didn't slam. She didn't cry loud enough for pity. She just disappeared behind it, and for the first time since she came home, Doug didn't feel anything about it. The social fallout did its work like gravity, slow, invisible, inescapable. No one excommunicated her officially. No one called her names. But people stopped asking for her help with scripture readings. A few couples changed dinner plans without explanation. One woman untagged her in a vacation photo from last summer. Melissa, who used to thrive in every whispering circle, was now the subject of them. And Doug, he went to church the following Sunday, sat alone, third pew from the front. Pastor Whitmore made eye contact. Subtle. A nod. Nothing else. No one asked Doug to leave. No one questioned him. If anything, people gave him more room, more respect. Because when the curtain gets pulled and everyone sees who's really pulling strings in the dark, it's not the one holding the flashlight that gets blamed. It's the one wearing the mask. By the second week, the silence got too loud for Melissa. She'd always known how to play the crowd, how to cry without sobbing, how to confess without admitting, how to look like a victim in heels. But the usual tricks weren't working. The usual sympathizers weren't biting. And Doug's silence was starting to hurt her worse than shouting ever could. So she did what manipulators do best. She pivoted. Emotional distress. She told a mutual friend on the phone, loud enough for Doug to hear from the living room. That's what started all this. I wasn't myself. I'd been feeling unseen, unappreciated, and honestly, is it so hard to believe a woman could just break under that kind of pressure? Doug sat on the couch, reading emails, unmoved. She wanted him to react. He didn't, because now her lies were like matches in the rain. She kept striking, but nothing caught. Then came the real move, the privacy breach claim. Melissa started telling people that Doug had violated her trust, that he'd hacked her location or illegally accessed hotel security footage or weaponized her personal moments. She stopped short of using the word abuse, but it lingered just close enough to be strategic. She even posted a cryptic message on Instagram just above a photo of a foggy lake. Some wounds are invisible, some invasions are quiet. Trust can be stolen, not just broken. The caption was followed by a Bible verse taken grotesquely out of context. Doug read it over a bowl of cereal and laughed under his breath. She was spiraling, and the best part was he didn't have to lift a single finger, but others were watching. Her father, usually quick to defend her in her dark nights of the soul, finally released a statement to the congregation. It was posted on the church bulletin board and read aloud by the associate pastor during service. Our family is going through a difficult time. We ask for your prayers, not your opinions, not your excuses, and certainly not your sides. We trust that God will reveal what is meant to be seen. Melissa wasn't there to hear it. She claimed she was not ready to be in that space yet. Doug sat near the back that Sunday. No one asked where she was. No one looked surprised. The next day, she confronted him again, this time with more bite. "I could sue you," she said, crossing her arms in the kitchen like it was a courtroom. "You violated my privacy." Doug looked up from his coffee. "Really? Going to sue your husband for asking your father to watch you cheat in HD? You didn't have my consent to send that video." He blinked. "Did you have my consent when you dragged our marriage into room 802? She opened her mouth, closed it, and then came the best part. Doug met with a lawyer. Just one meeting, no filing, no threats, just presence. Melissa caught wind of it. She always had a way of knowing things she shouldn't. Maybe it was a leftover instinct from years of micromanaging their life together. Calendars, emails, receipts. But when she saw the envelope from the law firm on the hallway table, her face dropped. "You're hiring an attorney?" Doug shrugged, slipping the envelope into his briefcase. "I'm exploring options." "For what?" He smiled faintly. "For peace, mostly." She scoffed, trying to hide the quiver in her voice. "You're just doing this to scare me." "I don't need to scare you, Melissa. You're already terrified. I can hear it every time you talk." She stood there like a statue in a storm, unmoving but slowly eroding. He didn't tell her what he and the lawyer discussed, didn't tell her that the firm specialized in strategic separations and asset protection, didn't tell her that one of their partners used to work PR for fallen clergy scandals, didn't tell her they'd offered to draft a document that wouldn't make him look like the angry husband. But the wronged one, the composed one, the one who never raised his voice, only raised the truth. He just let her guess. And that guessing ate her alive more than any evidence could have. because now she was the one watching someone else build a case, and this time it was airtight. She knocked on his office door like a guest, not a wife. Doug looked up from his laptop. She was wearing soft makeup and a sweater he hadn't seen in months, the one she used to wear on Sundays when she still wanted to be seen as pastor's daughter, perfect wife. Her eyes were glassy, and she held something in her hands, tissue twisted beyond use. It was her third attempt that week to find the perfect moment. This time, she didn't start with excuses. She went straight for the performance. "I was lonely," she said softly. No preamble, no defense. Just that, like she was announcing a cause of death. Doug leaned back in his chair. "Lonely." She nodded, eyes already tearing. "I know that doesn't make it okay. I know that. But you," she took a shaky breath, "you were so distant for so long. You were in your head all the time. You stopped, looking at me." Doug said nothing. She pressed forward. "I didn't plan it. It wasn't some affair. It was one weekend, Doug. Just one mistake. It got out of hand. I thought it was a reset. I thought maybe after I could just come back and things would feel different." He raised an eyebrow. "So that's what the robe was for? A spiritual reset?" That stopped her. She swallowed hard. "It was a mistake." "No," he said calm. "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. You packed lingerie and a bottle of wine for a man who isn't your husband. That's not a mistake. That's logistics." She wiped her eyes. "I want to fix this." He nodded slowly, closed his laptop, stood. "You want to make this work," he said, echoing her words like he was testing the taste of them. "Yes," she whispered. "I do." He walked to the credenza and opened the top drawer, pulled out a crisp folder, handed it to her. She took it, confused, opened it. Separation agreement. Simple. Clean. No mess. Just a formal invitation to end the lie. She looked up, mouth open. "Doug, what is this?" He tilted his head. "Then you should have packed differently." Her lips parted in stunned silence. She blinked as if maybe the page would change if she stared long enough. "You're really going to throw away 15 years?" she whispered. "I'm not throwing," he said, sitting back down. "I'm letting go." "Because of one night?" "No, Melissa. Because of every lie that came before and every lie you planned to tell after. The robe was just punctuation." She looked at the paper again, hands shaking. "You really had this ready?" "I had peace ready. This just helps deliver it." She stood there for a long time, holding the folder like it might combust, her mouth twisted like she was choosing between fury and collapse. But he didn't flinch, didn't rise, didn't comfort, just watched. "You want me to sign it?" she asked. Doug didn't answer right away. Then finally, "No rush. But every day you don't. You stay in a house where nobody believes you anymore. Not even you." She stepped back, nodded once, sharp and bitter. "Wow, you're really good at playing the calm victim." He smiled faintly. "I'm not a victim, Melissa. I'm a man who stayed long enough to see the mask fall." She didn't slam the door on her way out. She closed it gently, like she was afraid to wake something that had already left. Doug sat for a long while, just breathing. Then he opened the laptop again and scheduled a meeting with the lawyer, not to fight, not to punish, just to formalize what the footage started, the end of illusion. The folding chairs in the basement still creaked the same way, same flickering fluorescent light above the coffee urn, same dusty stack of hymnals shoved in the corner like an afterthought. Doug sat with 10 other men in a semicircle, heads bowed as someone shared about a rocky marriage, an aching silence between two people who once shared a bed, now just a postcode. Doug didn't speak. He hadn't for weeks. He came, listened, shook hands when appropriate, but his words were still inside him, slow and heavy, settling into places that used to hold guilt. This group used to be led by Pastor Whitmore. Once a month, he'd bring donuts and a parable, talk about restoration, discipline, and spiritual fatherhood. That was before the hallway footage, before the robe, before he looked at his daughter through a lens no scripture could soften. Now, a younger man, led, earnest, hopeful, new. Doug respected him, but it wasn't the same. After the group disbanded that night, Doug took his time putting on his coat. The others filtered out, tossing polite nods his way. He moved toward the door. That's when he saw him, Pastor Whitmore, standing in the shadow of the stairwell, as though he'd been waiting there since the closing prayer. Same coat, older eyes, no Bible. They didn't speak right away. Then the pastor reached into his pocket and handed Doug a small folded piece of paper. Wordless. Doug opened it. A wedding photo. Their wedding photo. Torn, clean down the middle. Melissa gone. Only Doug remained. Slightly off-center, suit pressed, smiling at something that had already vanished. He looked at it for a moment, then up at the man who'd once married them under soft lights and hopeful promises. Some sins deserve silence, the pastor said, his voice like gravel, but not secrets. Doug nodded. No speech, no apology required. He folded the photo once neatly and slid it into his coat pocket like it was just another document, nothing sacred, just something that used to mean something. Outside, the air was cold and clean. He walked to his car, unlocked it, sat for a moment before starting the engine. On the drive home, he passed by the hotel. He didn't look up at the 8th floor. Didn't need to. He arrived at the house, the one he was keeping, per the separation agreement. Melissa had moved into a condo across town, close enough to stay visible, far enough to stay irrelevant. Doug stepped onto the porch. The wood didn't creak anymore. He'd fixed that last month, during one of those quiet Saturday mornings that used to ache. He turned the key, entered, silence. Not tense, not loaded, just calm. He dropped his keys in the bowl by the door, took off his coat, and walked to the kitchen. One switch flipped, the porch light came on. No reason, no one to expect, just a habit now, a way of saying, this place is mine, this home still stands. He sat down at the table, the one where he'd once poured tea for a woman rehearsing lies. Now it was just him, and peace, not dramatic, not cinematic, just dignified, solid, earned, because he didn't scream, he didn't chase, he didn't become what she tried to make him. He exposed her, and then, with absolute clarity, he let her go.